In this volume, I propose to write a biography of Venice, and if it had seemed advisable, I should have prefixed that title to my book. In this volume, I propose to write a biography of Venice, and if it had seemed advisable, I should have prefixed that title to my book. Believing that a state in an organic whole, and that such an organism can be more easily studied in a city than in a territorial state, it appeared to me that the Venetian Republic presented one of the most striking examples of the inception, birth, adolescence, decline, and death of a community which history has to offer for our observation. Throughout her career, the personality of the Republic overshadows the personality of even her most distinguished citizens. No state, except Athens, has ever presented at the very core of her life the idea of herself with such sumptuous personifications in art. Athene in the Parthenon, Venezia in the Ducal Palace. After the two most illustrious examples of a nation's self-portraiture, through painting and through sculpture. With this conception in view, I have attempted to note the generation and gestation of the race, to display the operation of extrinsic circumstances such as geographical and natural position in the formation of its character, to trace the procedure of those intrinsic qualities such as commercial spirit, skepticism, and seamanship which led the nation to pursue its peculiar line of development, and to demonstrate the action of external forces in urging the state to commit errors for which she paid the penalty with her life. My endeavor has been to state facts and then to suggest causes and consequences. I am aware that such a method is exposed to a serious danger. It may induce the writer to strain facts in order to suit a theory, may lead him to construct what Ferrari styled storia ideale, of which his own book is a luminous specimen. I have done my best, however, to avoid this patent danger by clinging close to facts, and I present my reading of causes and consequences as nothing more than suggestions, which I state strongly because they are the best I am able to offer. A closer acquaintance with facts and acuter perception of cause may lead my readers to A closer acquaintance with facts and acuter perception of cause may lead my readers to different conclusions. Without the continual assistance of Romani in Storia Documentata di Venezia, an invaluable mine of information, I could not have written this book. I have made use of many other authorities, however, and their names will be found in a short bibliography, which I trust may prove of service to those who desire to pursue the study of Venice further than I have been able to conduct them. My sincerest thanks are due to Mr. J.A. Symonds, who in the course of reading the proofs, which he most kindly undertook to do, made many and various suggestions of the higher value for the construction of the work. Horatio F. Brown. Ca Torresella, Venice, December 1892. In preparing this new edition for the press, I have preserved the general structure of the book, as I found that without a considerable increase in the size of the volume, it would be impossible to carry out the expansion which some of my critics suggested as desirable. I have availed myself of corrections indicated by my reviewers and by private friends. I have made a few additions to the bibliography and some slight alterations in the maps, which I hope will add to the value of both. Horatio F. Brown. Ca Torresella, Venice, May 1895. It is unlikely that the physical aspects of the Venetian estuary have changed very much between the unknown period at which it received its first fisher population and the present day. The lagoons of Venice are a large sheet of salt water in form like a bent bow, the curve of the bow following the line of the mainland, while the string is represented by a number of long low, narrow islands called lidi, partly mud and partly sand, which are the most important characteristic of their formation. The lidi serve as a barrier which prevents the sea from sweeping over the lagoons and make it possible for man to build upon the island mud banks. But they do not separate the basin, thus created entirely from the sea. They do not convert the lagoons into a lake, for the lidi are pierced at several points by openings which admit the tide from the Adriatic and give egress and ingress to the inhabitants. At certain points inside the lagoon, where the muddy bottom is more solid, small islands formed partly by nature and partly by man rise above the water level. At first these islands were nothing more than barren banks of clay or mud, yet upon such dubious foundations the hardy fishermen of the estuary were destined to raise one of the most powerful and most beautiful cities that the world has ever seen. Though it is unlikely that the lagoons have altered very much within the period of their known history, it is probable that their surface was at one time of greater Though it is unlikely that the lagoons have altered very much within the period of their known history, it is probable that their surface was at one time of greater extent, that more of the mainland was under water than at present. For the 12 island townships enumerated in the Chronicle of John the Deacon, Sagornino, of the oldest Venetian chronicles which we possess, can all be identified to this day, though some of them are no longer, strictly speaking, cities of the lagoon. These 12 townships play such an important part in the early history of Venice, and we shall have to refer so frequently to most of them, that it will be as well here to give their names. They are Grado, Bibiones, Caprulae, Caorle, Heraclea, Jesolo, Cavellino, Torcello, Murano, Rialto, Metamaucus, Malamoco, Pupilia, Poveglia, Clugies Minor, destroyed in the Genoese War, and Clugies Major, Chioggia. The chronicler adds that these are besides these quam plurimae insulae habitabiles, very many more habitable islands. The account of the Venetian district generally, which we can gather from Livy and Strabo, shows physical conditions and habits of life similar to those which exist today. The whole region, says Strabo, speaking of the country between the Julian Alps and the Adriatic, abounds in swamps and rivers and is partially covered by the sea. That is the only portion which is affected by tides like the ocean, and there the larger part of the plain is transformed into a saltwater marsh. As in Lower Egypt, the water is directed hither and thither by ditches and dikes. Some of the island cities are completely surrounded by water. Others are washed on certain sides only. All commerce is carried on by boats, and these boats are built with flat bottoms to enable them to pass over the shoals. It is clear from these passages that the shores of the estuary were already inhabited at the beginning of the Christian era. Upon this point, Martial's famous lines in praise of the villas at Venetian Altino, comparing them with the villas of Neapolitan Baie, leave no doubt. Whether the lagoon islands were also peopled is not so certain, but there is reasonable presumption that they were. The direct route between corn-growing Pannonia and Rome lay through Aquileia to Ravenna by the waters of Venice, and those intricate channels must have required pilots who could only have been lagoon dwellers, intimately acquainted with the region in which they were born and bred. But though the islands of the estuary were probably inhabited, it is not to be supposed that their population was large or in any sense independent. The lagoons were under the jurisdiction of the great Roman cities on the mainland, Aquileia, Opitergium, Oderso, and Padua. It is not till we reach the period of barbarian invasion that we can begin to reckon the separate history of Venice. Those repeated incursions of the hungry hordes from beyond the Alps, exerted a double action on the development of the lagoons. First, they drove the mainlanders from refuge to the islands, and secondly, they gradually weakened and then destroyed the great mainland cities and thereby left the island population virtually independent, though still bearing the impress of the Roman civilization which characterized the cities from which it drew its origin. But this process of disintegration on the mainland and of regermination in the lagoons was a slow one. The various peoples drawn from the cities of the continent, who, under stress of danger, were to be eventually fused into the state which we call Venice, did not emigrate to the lagoon islands suddenly. As each wave of barbarian invasions passed over northeastern Italy and rolled away southward, or was repulsed beyond the Alps, the refugees from the mainland returned to their homes from their temporary asylum in the lagoon. Neither the invasion of the Marcomanni and Quadi in 117, nor that of the Goths in 378, nor that of Alaric in 400, was sufficient to convince the fugitives that their only sure dwelling was upon the impenetrable waters of the Venetian estuary. Some deposit of population, some residue of each of those emigrations, no doubt remained behind in the lagoon islands, and helped to prepare the way for the final acceptance of their water home by the mainlanders. But the majority, with that persistent love of the hearthstone, continued to rebuild their shattered houses and temples after each incursion, living in the incorrigible hope that the last attack would really be the last.